I don't have a shirt like this, but I thought about like getting a shirt and then writing it's time for the buffs on it.
The devs promised us all buffs for the upcoming patch, and boy did they deliver. We've got the patch notes for patch 1.0.3 for Diablo 4, and it's all buffs for all classes and basically everything in the game. So let's check out the patch notes together, shall we? But first I want to start with some gameplay adjustments, because they've been also talking about how they want to buff experience gains. So we've got a significant increase of experience awarded for completing nightmare dungeons, which was already announced and will be in this patch, so this is pretty good. They also significantly increased the experience gain from killing monsters in nightmare dungeons, also pretty good. But now we've got some other changes to XP gains. Helltide chests now provide substantially more bonus experience when opened. This is really good, because that makes Helltides even more lucrative, and they also significantly increased rewarded experience from completing individual whispers across the board. So those daily rewards should be even worth more. Fixed an issue where no experience was awarded for completing the holdout style event that can occur after finishing dungeon objectives. So those are all the changes to our experience gains, which were definitely needed. But they've also got some general changes we'll take a look at right now. Because Helltide roaming bosses will now more consistently drop higher quality loot, which is good because they were lackluster a lot of times and not really worth the time and effort you put into them. Players now can teleport to nightmare dungeons directly through the map, which is a great change. I know everybody hated just riding to every nightmare dungeon, and it always broke your farming flow. You couldn't really farm efficiently, so that's a really great change that was needed desperately. And also the weekly bonus caches from world bosses no longer have a level requirement for opening, which is also really good. I can finally open all those caches in my stash that I collected throughout the last weeks. And we've got also some developer notes. We're currently working on increasing the monster and elite density of endgame content and plan to introduce this change early in season 1. And that's a really good announcement, because killing more monsters in an ARPG is always welcomed. So please just give us as much as you can. We're always happy to have more monsters to kill. So that's a great change too that will be coming to the game. And now, before we check out all the changes to all the 5 classes in the game, which are only buffs, let's take a look at some bug fixes that made it into the patch. I'll just go over them briefly, so you either can slow down the video or pause it, or check out the link in the video description to the original blog post, where you can easily just read through everything yourself. And now let's take a look at what you've all been waiting for, the balancing changes for all the 5 classes in the game. And let's kick things off with some developer notes. We're continuing our efforts to make all class builds feel fun and powerful with another round of balance updates. In particular, we have seen community feedback stating that basic skills aren't impactful enough in combat. These changes will not change the fundamental relationship between basic skills and core skills, but we hope that they help smooth out the leveling experience while we explore additional ways to strengthen them. We are also increasing the power of some skills that players feel are lagging behind their peers. As we look forward to future updates, we're monitoring other heavily discussed topics such as minion survivability and build parity. Please keep sending us your feedback, and we'll see you in Sanctuary. So that is good info that they will further have a look into minion builds, for example, because they are definitely lagging behind. So let's kick things off with the Barbarian changes, and the Barbarian got some, I would say, rather minor changes, but still impactful enough and definitely all buffs all the way. So the lunging strike has its base damage increased from 30 to 33% and fury generated increased from 9 to 10. Bash also got fury generated increased from 10 to 11 and enhanced bash's fortify increased from 10 to 20%, which is huge. Frenzy also got a base damage increase from 20 to 22%, and Flay has its bleeding base damage increased from 36 to 40%, which is quite something. Fury generated increased from 9 to 10 and enhanced Flay's vulnerable chance increased from 10 to 15%, which is also pretty good. Double Swing got its base damage increased from 36 to 40%, and Kick got its cooldown reduced by 4 seconds down to 13 seconds. The base damage dealt to enemies knocked back into terrain was increased from 54 to 70%, which is also pretty good. Then we've got some changes to Charge. Enhanced Charge base damage dealt to enemies knocked back into terrain increased from 15 to 30%, so this should definitely have some impact. Leap also got a minor buff. Mighty Leap slow increased from 50% to 70%. Now we've got the defensive skills. Enhanced Iron Skin's barrier increased from 10 to 20% of maximum life, which is pretty good, and also all the ultimates got buffed. Call of the Ancients got a buff where Prime Call of the Ancients bonus attack speed is increased from 10 to 20%, and Iron Maelstrom got a cooldown reduction from 16 down to 45 seconds, which is huge. Prime Iron Maelstrom bonus critical strike chance increased from 10 to 30%, and Prime Iron Maelstrom bonus critical strike damage increased from 20 to 40%, so that's a really good buff here for Iron Maelstrom. Bounding Slam also got buffed. Base damage was increased from 75 to 112%. Then we've also got some legendary aspect changes, and another developer note. The below includes changes to flat damage legendary aspects. These effects scale with item power. For example, at 820 item power, Bulkato's Earthquake increases from 1747 to 3404 to 2687 to 3717 damage. So keep in mind that the stats always correlate to your item power level. Let's take a look at the changes to the legendary aspects. I'll just go over them real quickly so you can check them out, but they all got increased, so that's pretty good, and also items got some buffs here. If you enjoyed the video so far, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you want more content on Diablo 4, also consider subscribing to the channel and activate the bell notification to never miss a video. And if you want to further support the channel, please check out my partner Instant Gaming for gift cards for your respective store. You can save some bucks for your next purchase in the Diablo store, for example, or if you want to take a look at another game. So be sure to check out the links in the video description down below for some big saves while simultaneously supporting the channel. Thanks a lot, and now back to the video. I think the changes to the Barbarian were pretty good to kick things off, but now let's check out the Druid. His skills also were buffed significantly. Earth Spike got its base damage increased from 16 to 17%, and Spirit Generated increased from 10 to 11. Fierce Earth Spike Fortify increased from 4 to 8%, which is huge on a Druid. Wind Shear got its base damage increased by 1%, and Spirit Generated increased also by 1 point. Claw also got a good buff. Base damage was increased 2% up to 22, Spirit Generated increased from 10 to 11. Wild Claw double attack chance increased from 10 to 15%, and Fierce Claw's base damage was also increased from 10 to 15%, so some pretty significant buffs. Maul got its base damage increased from 20 to 22%, and Spirit Generated increased from 14 to 15. Enhanced Maul Fortify increased from 2 to 3%. And also Lightning Storm got buffed. Enhanced Lightning Storm duration increased from 4 to 6 seconds, and Primal Lightning Storm's chance to immobilize increased from 8 to 12%. Pretty good. Now let's check out Shred, which got buffed significantly. Third attack base damage increased from 60 to 70%, enhanced Shred's healing increased from 1 to 2% of maximum life, which is huge, and Raging Shred's base damage increased from 51 to 70%. Primal Shred's bonus critical strike damage increased from 20 to 30%. The Wolves companions also got some buffs. Their cooldown was reduced from 14 to 11 seconds, and Ferocious Wolfpack lucky hit chance increased from 10 to 40%. Hurricane's base damage was increased from 97.5 to 134%. Rabies base poisoning damage increased from 53 to 76%, and Cataclysm's base damage increased from 52 to 64%. So that's all pretty significant buffs. Lacerate's base damage was also increased by 60% up to 460, and Petrify's critical strike damage bonus is increased from 25 to 30%. Pummel's base damage also was increased from 140 to 180%. As you can see, many of the druid skills got some really good buffs, so that should definitely be felt, and it wasn't even like the druid was weak or something, but it definitely got some really good love here. We've also got some good changes to the passives and legendary aspects. I'll just go over them real quickly so you can check them out for yourself. Now let's go from one class that didn't really need that significant buffs to another class that desperately needs the significant buffs, which is of course the Necromancer. So all his skills also got buffs across the board, of course. Let's start with Reap, which got its base damage increased from 12 to 13%. Acolyte's Reap's cooldown between corpses reduced from 5 to 4 seconds. Decompose got its base damage increased from 30 to 33%, and base essence generated per second increased from 7 to 8. Also, corpses formed frequency increased from 2.5 to 2 seconds, which is really good. Hemorrhage base damage increased from 25 to 27%, and essence generated increased from 8 to 9. Bone Splinters also got its base damage increased by 1%, and essence generated also by 1 point. Sever got its initial base damage increased from 63 to 66%, and Enhanced Sever's return base damage increased from 25 to 40%, which is also a good buff. Bloodlance got its supernatural Bloodlance overpower requirement reduced from 8 to 6 casts, and Bone Prison got its cooldown reduced from 20 to 18 seconds. Dreadful Bone Prison's Fortify was increased from 5 to 8%, which is really good. And Iron Maiden was buffed significantly. Base damage was increased from 10 to 20%, and Horrid Iron Maiden damage bonus was also increased from 15 to 20%. That's really good. Let's check out the Corpse Tendrils, because Blight Corpse Tendrils' chance to spawn a Blood Orb increased from 30 to 35%. And Bone Spike's base damage was increased from 80 to 120%. Ray Skeleton and Golem minions will now always engage targets with a cast curse, which is a great change. And that's it for all the skills. Let's check out the passives and legendary aspects. Here are the changes for those. Feel free to pause the video or check out the link in the video description. Next up is the class that probably needed the least buffs. Of course, I'm talking about the Rogue. And to be fair, they only buffed skills that aren't heavily used in every build. So let's check out the balancing changes for the Rogue. We've got the Invigorating Strike. Its base damage was increased from 23 to 25%, and Blade Shift also was increased from 15 to 16%. Heartseeker got its base damage increased by 2%, and Primary Heartseeker damage increased from 30 to 75%, which is really strong. Forceful Arrow base damage was increased by 2%, and Barrage's base damage also was increased by 2%. Now we head over to the Caltrops. Methodical Caltrops chill increased from 20 to 25%, and the Smoke Grenade's cooldown was reduced by 2 seconds down to 13. We're already at the ultimate rain of arrows, cooldown reduced from 60 to 65 seconds and prime rain of arrows imbuement potency increased from 20 to 30%. Volley got its base damage increased from 70 to 105%, and that's it for all the skill changes. But there's one really notable passive change to close quarter combat, because its damage bonus was increased from 20 to 30%, which is huge. But that's it for all the skills, and passives, legendary aspects and items can be seen here. So I'd say those changes to the rogue were pretty fair, not too much, and some stuff was buffed that really needed some love, so that's absolutely okay. Let's check out, last but not least, the sorcerer. His skills, of course, were buffed. Let's start with the spark. Base damage was increased by 2%, enhanced spark damage increased from 5.6 to 7%, and flickering spark chance increased from 3 to 4%. Frostbolt's base damage was increased from 35 to 38%, and Firebolt's burning damage increased from 40 to 44%. Charged Bolt also got a base damage increase from 28 to 30%, and Incinerate's base damage was also increased from 49 to 54%. Enhanced Incinerate damage increased from 15 to 25%, and Greater Incinerate Immobilize requirement reduced from 4 to 3 seconds, so Incinerate got a really good buff. Fireball's mana cost was decreased from 40 to 35, and Frozen Orb's initial base damage increased from 32 to 36%. Explosion base damage increased from 29 to 34%, and Greater Frozen Orb chance to apply vulnerable increased from 25 to 30%, which is pretty good. Blizzard also got its base damage increase from 120 to 130%, and Ice Blade's chance to apply vulnerable increased from 30 to 40%. The Summoned Lightning Spear's maximum damage bonus was also increased from 100 to 160%, which is quite significant. Crackling Energy's base damage was increased from 15 up to 20%, and Freezing Wake's base damage from 60 to 110%. But that's it for all the, I would say, rather moderate changes for the sorcerer. It also didn't really need that much love, but it got some cool buffs. Those are the legendary aspect changes and also the changes to some items. And that's it. Those were all the changes made to the classes, and I think they were pretty reasonable. I wish every balancing patch would look like this, only buffs, but let's be real, there will be nerfs in the future, because you always have to bring in the outliers, and it's much easier to bring down some of the skills than to bring up everything and risk breaking more than fixing. So there definitely will be some balancing changes that will have some nerfs, and also there will be more buffs in the future. But I think this patch shows that Blizzard is going the right way with Diablo, and I really appreciated all of the changes. Let me know in the comments down below how your class is affected and if any of the changes affect builds you're playing currently. But that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and I wish you all an awesome day, and I'll catch you in the next one.